Thank you for joining us today at the Project Management Institute's Sustainability Summit 2023. We hope you enjoyed that session, and we will now have a short break.
Hallo, ich bin Martin Bertram. Ich bin seit einigen Jahren im Ruhestand und habe vorher mein ganzes Berufsleben in und mit Projekten verbracht. Eines der Dinge, die ich gerne anpacken möchte mit euch zusammen, ist die Nachhaltigkeit für die Zukunft unseres Planeten und der dort lebenden Menschen. Mein Fokus im Bereich Nachhaltigkeit, da ich jetzt eine Privatperson bin, ist das Minimieren des von mir erzeugten Treibhausgases. Das heißt, ich nutze vernünftige Transportmittel und überlege, was kann ich reduzieren, wie kann ich meinen Konsum ausrichten. Es müssen nicht immer Trauben aus Südafrika mit 10.000 Flugmeilen sein. Und auch das Thema Wegwerfen von Lebensmitteln beschäftigt mich, weil Erzeugung hat Treibhausgase erzeugt, Wegwerfen erzeugt weitere, und das ist völlig überflüssig.
I'm going to start my story today with one of the oldest stories that we've got records of, which is the devil and the blacksmith. So the blacksmith makes a deal with the devil because he wants to be able to bind any material. And then the blacksmith promptly binds the devil, winning that deal. Well, I have a different sort of storytelling. So have you ever played the game Consequences? I don't think I've played since I was a kid, where everybody fills in a different part of the story and then folds over the paper. And they can't see what's gone before. And sometimes I think sustainability is a bit like that. It's really difficult to see the whole picture at once, so it's really confusing, and the story doesn't always make any sense. So let's have a simpler story for us to work with. Let's imagine we're Dan Dare, pilot of the future, and we're going to Venus to establish a new community of people. We're going to learn a little bit about the past and how the modern world came about, and then we can think about how would we set up a new community. So the oldest deal was pretty simple: subsistence farming and a feudal hierarchy. So you ate what you could grow or what you could catch. Your house was made out of the building materials you could find about the place. You lived in a small community, and it was a pretty straightforward deal. We could have subsistence farming on Venus, for example. And there were other deals in the feudal system too. So you would generally pay tax to your lord, or maybe a levy or a tithe, or maybe to a monastery. And then they would pay tax to a king, or sometimes a queen. And the sovereign, let's call them, would take care of some of the central things like law and defense of the realm. And we could definitely have monarchs on Venus. Here's another important deal that was done in our past. In 1492, Christopher Columbus and Isabella of Castile did a deal to find, well, they thought it was the Indies, but obviously actually it was Americas. And then Isabella, well, it wasn't so much a deal as she just declared that the Americas now belonged to Spain, along with all its people and all of its resources. Maybe not a deal to repeat on Venus. And in the 1500s, a lot of Spaniards start moving to the Americas and setting up colonies, and huge deposits of silver are found. And all the silver is exported back to Habsburg Spain, and Spain becomes increasingly wealthy. Now, the chap in the middle is Charles V of Spain, and he uses the silver to do a lot of deals, mostly to go to war. One of the reasons there's an economic boom in the 1500s in Europe is because of the sheer amount of money that Charles V spends on mercenaries, which is something we could do on Venus, but it would be a bit of a shame. As a Habsburg, Charles is also the king of the Netherlands, and the Netherlands have kind of been sited in the middle of a lot of the medieval trade routes. And so they've got quite wealthy. And I think it would be great to keep international trade going on Venus, sharing ideas and resources. And all sorts of great things can come from trade. So we've got wool and sheep, which was kind of the bedrock of the UK economy for hundreds of years. Spices from the East, silk from China, and one of the first recipes for apple pie after sugar starts to come back with the Crusaders. Trade can do wonderful things, but it can also do some slightly different things. And here's an example of a bottom-up system. So the demand for sugar started to rise, so the demand for sugar cane started to rise. And lots of individual households wanted sugar, so lots of individual merchants and growers started supplying it. Now, sugar is grown in the tropical climates of the Americas, and it's very labour intensive to produce. And so a byproduct of the sugar demand is it kicks the transatlantic slave trade into overdrive. And millions upon millions of people are exploited and enslaved, and many of them are killed to satisfy the European sweet tooth. International shipping drives naval power, and so William of Orange, who's now the King of England, wants to be able to show off to the French, so he wants a navy. But he can't afford it by himself, so it goes back to a Dutch idea. And the Bank of England is established to finance the Royal Navy. Now, the Bank of England becomes one of the first stock markets, and all sorts of deals are done in the stock market, and some great things can happen. But some of the deals don't quite work out, as some of us found in around 2009 with a global recession. Things like stock markets can bring opportunities for investment, and we see this in the development of the textile industries, especially in the UK. So new technologies are coming in with mechanisation, and these technology leaps can lead to the steam power, and steam power really drives the Industrial Revolution, and you start to see much more specialisation and efficiency. The consumption of coal and gas and oil obviously increases, and that leads to a lot of carbon emissions. And this painting on the left-hand side is of a blast furnace. It's from 1801, and it's kind of symbolic of the start of the Industrial Revolution, which also brings huge rises in living standards. And this is one of the big challenges for when we're living back on Venus and looking at the consequences. How can we reduce carbon emissions, but also do it without increasing inequality? So if we were thinking about how to deliver the UN SDGs, would we have started by looking at Isabella of Castile? Probably not. So why did I? Part of the answer is to fix the world. It's important to know how it broke. And as project managers, we're kind of uniquely placed to see a lot of these different deals, from government spending down to supply chains. We understand top-down systems and client organisations and implementing standards. And we can also see all the different parts of a project, so we can see it from the bottom up. We can see how writing a scope or a design or contract clauses can influence the outcomes. And we can get involved there too, coming up with new ways to deliver projects and to advise our decision makers. So to summarise, there have been all sorts of deals in the past, some with great consequences that we'd want on Venus, and some like the sugar and slave trade with truly dreadful consequences. But let's think about how we can affect positive change together. How can we change our lives and our projects, and in doing so, change the world? Thank you for listening.
Creating a more sustainable future is the challenge of the century. Together we can engage, inspire and mobilise for action to improve the situation for people and the planet. How? Through the power of projects. Project management brings together the why, the what and the how. Let's come together to use our skills for action. Please get ready, because the next session is about to start.